This is the Weigh-In podcast by Benoit Chestnut. And on this week's Weigh-In, we're going to talk about many big things rolling. Can Jake Paul knock out Chavez Jr.? UFC 318, Holloway, Poirier 3, and Tupor versus Oliveira, 317. So let's jump right into it. But nonetheless, that is this week's weigh-in. So if we start off with our UFC boys, save the boxing boys for last. The box in us. To poor Oliveira, I really think that Oliveira, I think that should be an interesting one because you have a 16-0 Tapora and a 35-10 Charles Oliveira. But here's the thing. They got Oliveira as that underdog at that plus 325 and Tapora at negative 450. And then we got Paul Costa on that same card. Ooh. So that's a little nice stack. A little nice stacked card. So we got some good stuff. We got some good stuff on that card, and I think I think all in all, it's going to be some good stuff. I think we have a card that we can enjoy, a card that we can understand, and really, we can really have, fun with. That's one thing that I think is really good to just really good thing that's going on is that we have some good, really good matchups going through that. So the great thing is we got some good on that UFC 317. So 317, I think, has given us a good looking card. So UFC 317. Then let me pull it up for you. As I was just looking at it. But nonetheless, this is a really good card that they got going on here. Paul Costa is going to be a good one on there. I think the main event's going to look really good. Co-main should look really good too. They got some good guys around here. The losses aren't that big. The most losses I believe on here is 11. So that's gonna be really good. That's gonna be that's gonna be good. That's gonna be good. So they got some good they got some good events on this. And that's what I think. That's what I think is really good here. I think it's a good lined up card. I don't think you're gonna see anything that isn't good here. So you got some good lineup on this card. that that I think is very well scheduled. If we talk about this Holloway Portier, I think it's well scheduled too. I think it's pretty out there. It's really up there. Um, that would be UFC 318. So we go ahead. We're going to talk about UFC 318 now. This is going to be what I consider a nice one. So we got Dustin Poirier. We got we got Marvin Veretti. We got Allen on that card. Brendan Allen. You know, we got a lot of some really good guys on this card, and we got a women's fight on this card too. So that's gonna be pretty. That's gonna be good too. I think in terms of, we talked about this, the stacking up of the cards from Dana White is really good, and that lately we've been seeing really good cards come out from Dana White. Like even like Rob Whitaker and Renier D. Ryder, that's also going to take place as a UFC event. I'm pretty sure that's just a UFC fight night, but nonetheless, even that one's a good one. I think the you take an early look at, even saying, we talked about UFC 318, UFC 317, 319 looks good too. You got Jared Kushner and Michael Page as the co-main, and then Duplessis and Chimaev as the main. We're getting really good lined up events right now. Obviously, that one is not totally full yet, worth the stuff, but it's getting there. It's getting there. It's getting there. It's getting there to the point that I think I like it. I like what he's doing now. Obviously, Holloway, Poirier, we're getting a 3 of that, but nonetheless, sometimes those still come for really good fights. I think it's going to be really good. I think he's lining up these cards in a way that I like it. I like what he's doing. I like it. It's looking really good. Max Holloway can fight. You know, Anytime I see Max Holloway, he puts on a clinic. Whether he wins or loses, it's still a good Max Holloway fight, and that's the thing that's going on with Max Holloway. I like it. I like it of Max Holloway. I like what they're doing with him right now. I think that's great. You know, but UFC 319 still pretty light. It's not that many fights on it yet, but it's still pretty light. But nonetheless, that 317, 318 is looking really good. So that's going to be good. That 317 and 318 is going to look really good. And now, the big question that I'm sure we've answered this before. Can Jake, give me a second. Can Jake Paul knock out Chavez Jr.? Yeah. Say one more time. Can Jake Paul knock out Chavez Jr.? Yes, he can. I run this belief that at any time any boxer can be knocked out. Anything can happen. Anybody can be stopped. So I kind of feel like, you know, yeah, I feel like Paul can do it if it's there. Paul has the opportunity, the chance to do so. So I think it's going to look really, real steadily here. That if Paul is, if the given the I say given the opportunity, because some fighters can stand their ground a little better, stand their own. If he gets a chance, and and he can wobble Chavez Jr., take him down, knock him out. What I mean by take him down, you know, not not whatever happened during that Logan Paul event. Um, I will get you the name of who I'm thinking of in a minute. Dylan Dennis. Dylan Dennis. Not what happened during that Dylan Dennis fight. Um, you know. Take him down. You get a chance to take out Chavez Jr. Take him down. Take him down. By all means, take him down. That's the one thing I'm like. One thing I'm like, you get the chance, do it. This is a magnitude of an event where it's like, hey, we got to do what we got to do. We got to do what we got to do. If the opportunity provides itself, we have to do it. I think for Jake, you're lining yourself up a really good boxer here. You gotta continue to line up the boxers right now. Don't don't scrap us here and then like not schedule another boxer. Let's continue to see boxer after boxer. I think that's a really good thing that Jake is doing. That Jake, it looks like he's starting to do now. Is we got a boxer now. Obviously he's fought boxers before, whatever the case may be, but we want ranked professional boxers, and I think in terms of that, I think that's going to build his skill. I think you're coming in against a really, Chavez is up there. Obviously he's been beat. He's not a current world champion, but nonetheless, he's been beat. And, will he fall into the Jake Paul reckoning? Will he be another victim in the Jake Paul reckoning? And it's very well possible because, Chavez did not live up to who his father was. He was not, the Stanley of the sport, the big, the staple, in the ring almost. He wasn't. It wasn't like that. So now you're coming in against a Jake Paul that, we're talking about Jake Paul, Tank Davis. He's thinking about getting in with Tank Davis and all this, and he's thinking about challenging himself on heights that many might not even jump to, but yet he lines up Chavez Jr. and I think I don't think Chavez is going to get it done. I just don't. I just don't see that in the types of boxing we get from Chavez. I just don't think Chavez is going to do the things that everybody is expecting him to do to stop Jake Paul. I don't think Chavez has what it takes because Jake is a good boxer. Jake is very hard to put Jake on the canvas. It's not going to be easy to do something like that, but you're going to have to do it. And I think the likelihood of Chavez doing it, I don't really think so. I would give more of that likelihood to Tank Davis. I would say Tank Davis is more likely, has a higher percentage chance to knocking down Jake Paul than Chavez does. But you know what? Like I say, anything can happen at any time, and that's boxing. You never know. But I'm still gonna say I think Paul can knock him out. And as far as it goes in terms of where the weigh-in stands, the weigh-in is fully backed Jake Paul. Fully backed to Jake Paul for this fight. We think Jake Paul is going to win, and I do as well. As far as the weigh-in things, Jake Paul. There's no other way to go about it. That Paul's got this, and Paul's going to do what we think. And let alone we are 2 weeks out from that fight, so we don't have to wait that long for the Jake Paul reckoning of Chavez Jr. And I just think in the manifest in the way the events are being in the way Paul is lining up his events. First of all, Most Valuable Promotions, promotion company where he's co-owner of, they're lining up a lot of good boxers. When they got into the game, they didn't have a lot, but they're lining up a lot of good boxers. Let's be honest. MVP, they're gonna start hosting some fire events. Some really good events with all these boxing. They got a lot of women over there, which is really good because their women over there can box. I can't wait for Amanda versus Katie. Amanda Serrano versus Katie Taylor. I can't wait for that because the last fight was good. The one before that was good. I think every time they've gotten the ring has been so good, and now we got another one. It's just Some people don't understand. I can admire some good boxing now. In all forms of boxing, I can admire some good boxing. And every time they fight, it is some good boxing. It is. It is. If you have never seen an Amanda Serrano, Katie Taylor fight, I suggest you YouTube it. I suggest you YouTube it because it's that good. It's that good. You catch it up. But in terms of like, being it every time that fight has happened, it's been for the undisputed belts. So now we know them is some good fights. When you got all them belts on the line, plus those two, it's worth it. It's worth it. Them fights have been really good. So, I do think that that's another really good thing to get is that, in terms of like boxing and UFC, we're starting to see a little bit of the matchups we want. You know, in terms of Canelo, we told him we'd like to see Jake Paul scheduled or we'd like to see Terrence Crawford scheduled. We got Terrence Crawford. Really good. We got Terrence Crawford, which is great. And in terms of Jake, we're seeing him schedule a boxer. Now he's talking about getting going up against Tank Davis, another boxer. So, we're getting a lot of good stuff going, which is absolutely really good from Jake. And that's a really good thing to start getting, seeing a lot of this good Jake Paul stuff that we're getting. And I think that's really good in terms of everything, to be able to get that stuff scheduled and see that we're getting, these Jake Paul fights that we've wanted. We're getting good old fashioned Jake that is providing us these fights that are the stuff that the stuff that we wanted to get. We've been wanting to for a while now to have Jake against a boxer, Jake up against a boxer, Jake up against a boxer. We've been saying, Jake, fight a boxer, Jake, fight a boxer, Jake. Gotta fight a boxer, Jake. You got to start getting in there with boxers. How you expect the commission to rank you and the commission to do certain stuff if you're not getting in there with boxers? You're not taking it, you're not taking it serious where you keep scheduling all these people who are not boxers. And in terms of that, we kind of looked and said to ourselves, we want boxer scheduled, boxer needs to be scheduled, boxer needs to be scheduled. Finally, it has been answered and we're getting a Chavez Jr. and and this is great. And then now we're hearing he's trying to line up Tank Davis. Now, when we said schedule a boxer, we did mean schedule a boxer, but we didn't mean go and schedule a guy that is hard to be beat. You're not a Lamont Roach. You're not going to get in there and tussle like Lamont did. That is a once in a lifetime mistake by Tank. That's never going to happen again. As far as I believe, I don't think he ever going to make that mistake again, going in there and underestimating somebody, And I think as for Jake, you're not going to get in that fight and do what you think you are, but schedule tougher boxers ahead of that so that you can kind of get yourself ready for that, And as we know, anything can happen, but the likelihood of Jake going in there and, I'll tell you this, it's not going to be a knockout. I think that's going to go to distance. If Paul is to even stand a chance to get that fight, it's going to have to go the distance, And even then, I still don't think it's going to slide the way Jake thinks because of what happens and how when boxing fights go the distance, they don't always slide the way of the opponent they want. So that's kind of why I think it's not going to go this way or that way for Jake because of how just how most boxing is. You're asking a commission to pick a guy that has not seriously fought boxers ever in his career, and I say seriously because I'm going to solve the issue. How many times have you seen Jake schedule boxers back to back to back? Boxers. I'm not saying they have to be ranked, but boxers, real boxers, not action sports guys, not somebody who's a big YouTuber, a boxer, back to back professional boxers. How many times have you seen that? And I understand you're going to say, well, he fought Tommy Fury and then he fought Anderson Silva. Anderson Silva is not a professional boxer. He comes from UFC. So still no. Like boxer, started his career boxing. I'm not saying you got to have amateurs, but boxing, full length boxing career, back to back. We've never seen that. So to say, you know, Jake's scheduling something again, and now we're getting a Chavez Jr. Now we're getting a boxer, and then now he's talking about scheduling another boxer. So this is unheard of in the scheduling of Jake Paul. Like you don't, we've Jake Paul doesn't schedule boxers back to back like that. So we're getting this thing of where this is real interesting, you know, and then we'll get lucky if it's back to back to back. So if we get three straight boxers, you know, then yeah, because there were a lot of boxers that wanted to fight Jake, after that Mike Tyson fight, and there's a lot of them that probably still want to get Jake, but who who's running from it? It's hard to tell. I don't think it's that type of situation. I think a lot of these deals are falling through because we got to give Jake some credit and we have to give Canelo a little bit of credit. They tried to schedule that. They really did. So now we're finding out they are trying to get to that. Jake Canelo is trying to silence Paul. And do I think that is going to go the way Jake thinks or Canelo thinks? I don't think so. I think they may surprise each other, if they ever schedule that. But, I think that would be a more leveled fight for Jake, more than he maybe say more than maybe we would say Tank Davis would be. Tank Davis isn't gonna be as close a matchup as it would be Canelo. I'm gonna tell you why, because look at Tank. Tank is hard to be beat. Many of you cannot agree with me and say, no, I think it's the same thing. I think Jake can't beat them both. Now, I'm not saying Jake can beat Canelo. I'm not saying Jake can beat Tank Davis. I'm telling you, Tank Davis is 99.9. I'm gonna say there's 1%, not 100%. There's 1%, really 1%. That 1%, that little fraction of a percent, that Jake could go in there and win. He could. Now, when it comes to Canelo, again, that fraction of a not that fraction of a percent. I give it that fight can go either way. Jake's good and lined it up, and Canelo's not put himself in an area where somebody has been able to tear him the way. But listen, we're gonna see what we get from Terrence Crawford, because Terrence Crawford could possibly provide us something more than we think. Terrence Crawford can come in here and do the Lamont Roach, go in there and prove that, hey, I'm here for a reason. And I think we could get that. And I think that's going to be very interesting in terms of just, in terms of looking at that as a Jake standpoint. I don't think Jake has that power to do so, because I don't think anybody's ever going to underestimate Jake. I think everybody knows what Jake has. Everybody knows what Jake's power is. Everybody knows, what's all about the Jake Paul. And I think that it's going to be very hard to find somebody who's going to underestimate Jake Paul. It's just really, you know, really, really, I find it unlikely. And I say that because you need somebody who's going to look at Jake and say, "Oh, Jake's not this, Jake's not that." But who's going to do that? Who's going to look at Jake and say, "No, Jake's not this, Jake's not that"? I don't think it's going to happen like that. Like everybody thinking, at least. I don't. I don't foresee. We'll see that Jake getting. I don't foresee Jake getting to humble somebody of that magnitude, like a Tank Davis, or going in there and giving the work to a Canelo. I I, I think I could see it being a good fight, but some of those matchups is just, hey, you gotta have a little more buckle under your belt, a little more experience before you start going and taking stuff like larger fights that you think that you can go through and really etch out, your most skilled opponent is Chavez. So let's see how Chavez fight goes. If we can see how that fight, how that fight weighs itself out, then we can kind of have a little more understanding of how Jake can do against more skilled opponents. And once we get all that, then we'll have kind of a kind of almost an estimate of what we think Jake can do, and that's going to be really good. That kind of estimate we'll be able to get of what Jake can do, and I think that's going to be really, really good in terms of what Jake can do. Will it happen? That's going to kind of be up to the way the event's going to fall. You never know. As I always like to say, you never know how them cards are going to roll, how them cards are going to fall. You never know. You never know how the how the dice is going to roll and the cards are going to fall. Jake could go in there and cut Chavez early. And, it's hard to fight when you got to cut. It's not easy when you got a big gash over one of your eyes, wide open. It's not easy when the gashes are here or here. It's not easy. So the difference here is going to be if Chavez gets cut early, that may be an early indicator in sliding away of Jake. But I think if either opponent gets cut, big cut, not a little cut, big cut, it's going to look interesting, but I think, Chavez is putting himself up here like, hey, I'm the boxer, but even look at Chavez's scheduling. Chavez's scheduling has not been of a professional boxer. It's been a little unorthodox as well, so I kind of feel like even him's kind of not really, doing as he should, but yet we're getting that scheduling of Jake. We're getting a good scheduling of Jake. Because a lot of people don't want to fight Jake. I think most people don't want to fight Jake because they know he's got something going on there, and their worry is can they figure it out by fight night, and you can't always look at stuff and say, hey, I got to figure this out, or I've got to know what Jake Paul is all about. I don't think that is the seeable case. You don't have to have all of it figured out, but most of them want to have it figured out. But about Jake, they want to have what they can and can't do. Some can do it, some can't. That's just the way I look at it. Some can do it, some can't. And not everybody's gonna have the power to go and do it. But it's not easy to say, hey, I got to figure out my opponent before fight night. It's not something that is just done right away. It's not something that you see is just like, it's not something everybody gets to. Some of them go round by round. Like Canelo, some of his fights, he still tries to figure the round by round. You figure out what he's up to. What is he doing? Not everybody has their opponent figured out by when they need to, so I kind of feel like for them to sit there and judge the book and say, hey, he's gonna have it figured out. I mean, maybe, maybe a boxer could have it figured out by that time, maybe. But do I think it's possible that either boxer is going to figure each other out within the first 5 rounds? If we're in terms of Jake and if we're talking Jake Paul, in terms of the next Jake Paul fight with uh, Chavez Jr. No, I think it's going to be in the first 3 rounds. It's going to take him at least 3 rounds. Between 3 and 5. I think they'll have each other figured out by 3 and 5. Between that rounds 3 and 5, I think they'll have each other figured out where it'll start to pick up really well. But is that going to be the case? We don't know. It could go either which way. We don't really know, but we'll find out how it goes or how it doesn't go, in terms of the way the fight may fall, we'll see. But still, again, we may never know. So nonetheless, this is this week's weigh-in. You know, just getting up here, touching a little topics as far as UFC boxing. But like, comment, subscribe, share. Always enjoy getting up here doing videos for you guys. And you know, this is the weigh-in by Benoit Chestnut and normally Sebastian Romero, but he will return at some point. So with that being said, weigh-in out.
The way in where stories ignite.